In the heart of the Middle East lies the city of Jerusalem, a place of immense religious significance. For Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike, it represents the divine, the holy, and the sacred. Yet, for over 2 centuries, this city became the focal point of a series of brutal religious wars known as the Crusades. It all began with a call to arms, a plea from Pope Urban II in 1095, which would change the course of history. To understand the Crusades, we need to go back to the late 11th century. Europe was a continent dominated by feudalism, with the Catholic Church serving as the unifying force. For centuries, Christian pilgrims traveled to Jerusalem, the land of Jesus Christ, seeking to connect with their faith. But in 1071, a critical event shifted the balance of power. The Seljuk Turks, a Muslim dynasty, defeated the Byzantine Empire at the Battle of Manzikert, taking control of much of the Holy Land. As the Seljuk Turks gained control, the once open routes to Jerusalem for Christian pilgrims became dangerous. News spread across Europe of mistreatment and violence against Christians in the Holy Land. The Byzantine Emperor, Alexios I Komnenos, sent a desperate plea for help to the Pope in Rome. What followed would ignite one of the most significant and controversial series of wars in history. Pope Urban II, seeing an opportunity to unite Christian Europe, responded to the Byzantine plea with an audacious call: a crusade to reclaim Jerusalem. At the Council of Clermont in 1095, he declared, Deus vult, God wills it, and thus began the First Crusade. For the first time, Christians were called to take up arms for a religious cause, to fight in the name of God, to free Jerusalem from Muslim control. The First Crusade saw an overwhelming response. Thousands of knights, soldiers, and peasants answered the call, setting off on a treacherous journey across Europe and Asia Minor. It wasn't just a war for land, it was a war for the soul of Christendom. The Crusaders believed that by fighting for the Holy Land, they were securing salvation. After a long and brutal journey, the Crusaders finally reached the gates of Jerusalem in 1099. What followed was a bloody siege, culminating in the capture of the city. The Crusaders, overwhelmed by religious fervor, massacred many of the city's Muslim and Jewish inhabitants. The city was now under Christian control. Following the First Crusade, the Christians established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, ruled by a Latin king. Despite the Christian victory, the Holy Land remained a region of conflict and tension. Muslim forces, led by leaders like Saladin, began to organize a series of campaigns to reclaim the city and the surrounding regions. In 1187, Saladin, a brilliant and charismatic leader, united Muslim forces and launched a campaign to retake Jerusalem. His forces swiftly reclaimed much of the territory lost during the First Crusade. When Saladin captured Jerusalem, he spared the lives of many Christian inhabitants, allowing them to leave safely. His actions provided a stark contrast to the brutality of the Crusaders' capture of the city nearly a century earlier. After the fall of Jerusalem, Europe's Christian rulers weren't ready to give up. The Second Crusade was launched in 1147, aiming to recapture the lost territories. This crusade, however, was poorly planned and executed. King Louis VII and Emperor Conrad III led the campaign, but they faced fierce resistance from Muslim forces, including those under the leadership of the formidable Zengi and Nur ad-Din. The Second Crusade ended in failure. The Crusaders were unable to reclaim much of the Holy Land, and the dream of a Christian kingdom in the region began to fade. The failures of the Second Crusade marked the beginning of a long, tumultuous period for the Crusader states in the Middle East. The Third Crusade, launched in 1189, saw some of the most famous figures of medieval Europe take to the battlefield. King Richard the Lionheart of England, King Philip II of France, and Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa all took part in the campaign to reclaim Jerusalem from Saladin. However, despite intense fighting, the Crusaders never recaptured the city. The Third Crusade ended with a negotiated peace. Richard and Saladin agreed to allow Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem, while the city itself remained under Muslim control. This marked a temporary pause in the Crusades, but the conflict was far from over. The Fourth Crusade, launched in 1202, took an unexpected and controversial turn. Originally aimed at recapturing Jerusalem, the Crusaders, in a series of misadventures and political schemes, ended up attacking the Christian city of Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire. In 1204, the Crusaders successfully sacked Constantinople, leading to a disastrous blow to the Byzantine Empire. The city was looted, churches were desecrated, and the Byzantine Empire was weakened, never to fully recover. This event further strained relations between the Eastern and Western Christian worlds. By the late 13th century, the Crusader states in the Middle East were slowly being wiped out. Muslim forces recaptured the last Christian strongholds in the region, marking the end of the Crusades. But the impact of these religious wars was profound. Despite the violence and bloodshed, the Crusades led to significant cultural exchanges. European knights encountered advanced Muslim technologies, medicine, and science. The Crusades also left a lasting legacy on trade, politics, and religious relations, influencing the course of European and Middle Eastern history for centuries. The Crusades remain one of the most complex and contentious chapters in history. While they were driven by religious zeal, they also sowed divisions that persist to this day. Whether seen as holy wars or acts of conquest, the Crusades changed the world, forever shaping the relationship between Christianity, Islam, and the history of the Middle East.